Section 5.3.5, the Grand Jury. Hi everyone, and welcome back to our channel. Today, we're diving into the grand jury system within the U.S. criminal justice framework. We'll explore how it functions, the criticisms it faces, and its historical origins. Let's get started. An arrest by the police is not a guarantee that a suspect will go to trial. A determination of probable cause must be made, either by a judge or by a panel of citizens, depending on the jurisdiction. In the federal government and approximately half of the states, a grand jury, which typically consists of up to 23 members, is responsible for this determination. If the prosecutor convinces a majority of the grand jury that there is sufficient evidence to support the criminal allegations, the grand jury approves the indictment. Critics of the grand jury system view it as a violation of due process and argue that it should be abolished. Grand jury hearings are held in private, and hearsay evidence is admissible. The defendant does not have the right to an attorney or to cross-examine witnesses. Grand jury proceedings are ex parte, meaning that the defense is not represented. These aspects of the process have led many to question its fairness. The grand jury system originated in medieval England as a means of protecting citizens from unfounded prosecution by the Crown. It was intended to serve as a check on the government, ensuring that individuals were not subjected to arbitrary and unjust charges. However, some scholars argue that the grand jury system has evolved into a mechanism for reinforcing the prosecutorial power of the state, with little regard for defendants' rights. Many of the procedural protections afforded to defendants during criminal trials, such as the exclusionary rule and the right to a speedy trial, do not apply to grand jury proceedings. As a result, critics maintain that grand juries have become a rubber stamp for prosecutors. The lack of transparency and the absence of an adversarial process during grand jury hearings are primary concerns. Grand jury proceedings are unique in that they allow for a broader scope of evidence compared to criminal trials. This includes hearsay, which is typically not admissible in a trial setting. The rationale is that the grand jury is not determining guilt or innocence but rather deciding whether there is enough evidence to proceed with a trial. This broader scope can sometimes lead to the inclusion of unreliable or prejudicial information. The absence of the defendant and their attorney during grand jury hearings also raises significant concerns. Without representation, the defendant cannot challenge the evidence presented by the prosecution or provide their own evidence and witnesses. This one-sided nature of the proceedings has led to criticisms that grand juries heavily favor the prosecution. Despite these criticisms, proponents of the grand jury system argue that it serves an essential function in the criminal justice process. They believe that grand juries provide an additional layer of review before a case goes to trial, potentially filtering out weak or unfounded cases. This can prevent defendants from facing unnecessary trials and the associated personal and financial burdens. However, the effectiveness of grand juries in serving as a check on prosecutorial power is debatable. Some argue that because the prosecutor controls the presentation of evidence and the legal advice provided to the grand jury, the process may still be biased in favor of the prosecution. This raises questions about whether grand juries truly function as an independent body capable of impartial decision-making. The grand jury system also varies significantly across different jurisdictions. In some states, the use of grand juries is mandatory for certain types of cases, while in others, it is at the discretion of the prosecutor. These differences can lead to inconsistencies in how justice is administered across the country. In recent years, there have been calls for reforming or even abolishing the grand jury system. Some suggest implementing preliminary hearings instead, where a judge, rather than a grand jury, determines whether there is enough evidence to proceed to trial. Preliminary hearings are typically open to the public and provide greater procedural protections for defendants, including the right to legal representation and the ability to cross-examine witnesses. Others propose increasing the transparency of grand jury proceedings by allowing defendants and their attorneys to be present or by recording the proceedings and making them available for review. These changes could help address concerns about fairness and accountability within the grand jury system. Despite the criticisms and calls for reform, the grand jury system remains a fundamental part of the U.S. criminal justice process. It reflects the historical roots of the legal system and the ongoing tension between protecting individual rights and ensuring public safety. As debates about its effectiveness and fairness continue, it is crucial to consider how best to balance these competing interests. In conclusion, the grand jury system plays a critical role in the criminal justice process, but it is not without its flaws. The lack of transparency, The absence of procedural protections, and the potential for prosecutorial bias are significant concerns that warrant careful consideration. As the legal landscape evolves, it is essential to continually evaluate and improve the processes that ensure justice is fairly administered. Thank you for joining us today. If you found this video informative, please give it a thumbs up and share it with others who might find it interesting. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more videos on criminal justice topics. If you have any questions or topics you'd like us to cover, leave a comment below. See you next time.